Okay, we're live. Hello, Brent Leary here. Friday. Actually, it's a beautiful Friday here in Atlanta. I think we're going to get up to about 80 degrees. It seems like the weather has gotten better every week since the Rams won the Super Bowl. I'm just going to be honest with you. so, so here today with me for the moment, Raju Vagesna, who is the chief evangelist for Zoho and a friend of mine, of course, and helping fill in while we wait and get Tejas Gadhia to join us to talk a little bit about Zoho Creator Platform. But in the meantime, Raju, thanks for joining me, man. This is great.
Thank you for having me, Brent. Great to be here.
And let me say also, congratulate you because Zoho, as I think about it right now, last week we just did the Paul Greenberg CRM Watch List Awards, and Zoho was on it, and Zoho actually had the highest score. So
Thank you.
congratulations.
Thanks, Brent. Thank you and Paul. And you had some very nice words to say on the show. I really appreciate that. And thank you for the support as always.
Well, I know one thing that he touched on out of the very many things that you guys do was the area of transnational localism. Maybe you could fill us in about what that is and what that means to Zoho.
It's about the new strategy we pursued and seeing where things are going. We believe, we should have a strong presence in each of the regions, each of the countries, hire local talent, and use that local talent to help the local businesses and whatnot. Instead of centralizing it from a single place and trying to, serve the world, we should have local offices, hyper local, very extremely regional offices. Hire the local talent, instead of moving everyone from into a city. Go to a town where there is talent, but there are no jobs. Take the jobs there and train the people, and of course use them to serve the local business, and they will be helping serve the local businesses, which means they'll be proud to be helpful to the businesses that are local, that they go in on a daily basis, and help them out. Or another way to look at transnational localism is to say rooted, unconnected. You're rooted locally within your community. You grow well individually, the community grows well with it. Yet you're connected to the global world where you're still learning from each other. One idea implemented in one country can be used in and learned from and used in a different country. So in the last, say, year and a half or so, we opened offices in about 10 new countries. Never had offices in. And I don't think anybody in the company can give you an exact number of offices that we currently have, because in the last 2 years we opened around 40 plus offices, I would say, roughly. So, and it's changing fast. But in general, that is something we believe in, and we are executing fast.
It's great to hear that kind of strategy to work where the people are instead of kind of force them to come to where the work is. I think generally speaking, that'll have large scale ramifications for years to come as you guys develop that out. So that's great.
Yeah, I think the cloud enables that. If anything, the pandemic proved it and accelerated it, but there is still value in face to face. And there are some technologies that kind of can change the game. Just like believe, you know, some a technology like elevator accelerated the adoption of cities, right? People, buildings went vertical, increasing the density. Cloud can be the elevator of the ruralization, and so that you can go in the opposite direction. You can be in a rural place yet be connected to the global marketplace and serve the local community. So it took elevator for several decades to get to where we are today with hyper densities. I think cities have gotten too big, but it's time the pendulum swings in the other direction. that's the reason we move outside of these major cities and major metros and set up offices in various locations, uh, mini locations, I should say.
Awesome. The idea of being able to allow folks not in these typical central locations to have work, build a presence, and then help build their communities. As yeah, the cloud helps to do that. And matter of fact, we're going to talk about that maybe in a different perspective with what you guys are doing with Zoho Creator and how that's allowing more people to build things. Here he is, Tejas
Howdy,
Gadhia.
howdy.
I almost
Got the
feel
gang back
like,
together.
yeah, I almost feel like I should be talking about privacy at this point, but we will sometime soon, right?
For sure.
Well, hey, Raju, really appreciate you stepping in and sharing that transnational localism story and how I think we're going to be hearing a lot more of that over the coming years. So thanks again.
Thanks a lot, Brent. Over to you, Tejas.
Adios. Bye.
All right. So Tejas, let's talk about the news that came out yesterday around Zoho Creator. Why don't you give us the high level?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with kind of just building off the thread that Raju started with, I mean, about transnational localism and how that kind of affects not just where people live, but just their productivity overall. So low code is, I would say, there's a lot of common threads because basically what we're doing is we're empowering people who traditionally didn't have the capability, the skill set, or maybe even the time to be able to solve their own problems and take matters into their own hands and not have to outsource it to IT. So just like to work at a big company or to like be more settled in life, you might have to move to a big city, pay a high amount in rent, or not be able to afford a house. It's the same way where like you don't have to do that. You can stay where you are, stay in your team, solve your own problems, and ultimately problems are solved when you're closer to them. If I have to ask a consultant or a developer, someone who's not familiar with my day to day, to solve a problem, build something that's going to make my life easier, it's always difficult because you're having to translate things into maybe requirement documents. A lot of stuff is lost in translation, like a game of telephone. And so ultimately, if I can be able to say, hey, look, I know the ins and outs, the intricacies, things that maybe are second nature to me in my head about how a process kind of works or intuitiveness, but it's kind of maybe forgotten when I'm writing out, this is what I need from somebody else, right? Sometimes it's just always easier to do it yourself generally, but people don't have the time and the skill. So low code is all about bringing that power back to individuals who have intimate knowledge of the process they're trying to solve or the application they're trying to build, and then letting them do it, which is the most important thing. And ultimately what we see is once you start building something, you become very good, and it just increases your, first of all, technical skill set, knowingly or unknowingly, because from a low code perspective, you're building an application, but it's not like traditional application development. So it's not like you have to watch a Code Academy course for 6 hours and then maybe you learn that language and can build something, maybe you can't. But here, we kind of like subtly teach you the foundations of application building and good application building, best practices, without you explicitly knowing that that's what's happening. And then how you approach problems in the future in your role. It's all around problem solving, logical thinking. How am I going to organize this data? How's this process can be mapped out? Those are all skills that basically just get built up when you think a little bit more along the lines of how is an application going to be structured. And so there's a lot of common threads in terms of just bringing power back to the people in order to build things and solve problems and be more productive in their current state.
Awesome. It seems like we're having some technical difficulties on LinkedIn, which is unfortunate. It seems like we're streaming everywhere else. So why don't we just keep going, and maybe I'll rebroadcast this as a stream later on. But let's get into Zoho Creator, the platform, in terms of what you guys were just announcing, and really kind of the different approach that you guys take as you look to have one space for business folks and IT to operate this kind of thing over.
Yeah, so I'll start by taking a few steps back. So the very first version of Creator came out. I mean, the idea, I remember Sridhar saying that he kind of had a inkling for it in 2004. The first version came out in 2006. And so about 15 years, we've been kind of constantly improving the product, making it more capable. And one of the main reasons we're able to get as far as we are is because the core people that were on the team building the application in 2006 are still our team leaders right now. So, I mean, I might be the mouthpiece here, but I mean, there's folks like Hyder and Charles on the team who have been around since day one. And these guys have had that vision for 15 years, consistently executing it. And every couple of years, we add new functionality that kind of goes with the market. But ultimately, this newest version that we've launched today, or yesterday, I guess technically, is all around building not just an application, but there's two main pillars, I would say, that kind of build out business solutions rather than just an application. One is around integrations, which are extremely important because in an organization, there's more and more software solutions out there. And a custom application is probably talking to another business application. Maybe your CRM, maybe your help desk, maybe project management, maybe finance. And so there has to be an integration platform baked in. The second piece, or the third piece, sorry, is I would say arguably the most important one, and that's really around analytics. And so most low-code platforms will let you run reports, create like a chart, maybe a map or something along those lines, very simple visualizations. But to really get business intelligence, you were traditionally having to go to some other BI tool, maybe Power Apps, maybe Tableau, not Power Apps, Power BI or Tableau. And so one is you have to be a BI person to know how to use those tools. And two, you have to do an integration, which is not the easiest thing in the world and not ideal. And so we've basically baked in a business intelligence platform, an integration platform, an app building platform, all three into a unified interface. And so this way, a business user who might not be a business intelligence person is still going to get access to low code means of driving business insights. And so one key example of that is kind of our conversational analytics. And so you can simply type in, like you talk to Siri or like you talk to our Zia assistant, and you say, show me a chart of all the accounts in the US that are from high value customers over 100,000 in revenue or sales or something like that. And it'll generate the chart for you. And then you can keep typing and it'll auto suggest all the different things. And it's a very easy way to like slice and dice the data rather than either writing SQL queries or having to point and click and configure. Anybody who's created charts know the creation is most annoying. You have to figure out what the axes are, what are the legends I'm going to use, what are the ranges, what are the criteria. It's just a whole hot mess. And we kind of just absolve all of that problem from people. And so that's, I would say the crux of it is really bringing together or expanding what the definition of a low-code platform is beyond just app building to include integration and analytics, because we really think all three of those together are tightly connected, and that's what really makes a business solution, which is what people really want, is a solution, not just an app. I think business solution maybe is a marketing term or a little bit more cliche, but ultimately it is the truth. You do need more than just building an app. You have to drive insights from the app, which is why you built it in the first place, and it needs to talk to other products. And so that's probably the quick elevator pitch for you.
No, that's great. Actually, it makes a lot of sense that all these different users, if you're able to allow them to work in a similar area, then that means there's less silos, there's less confusion, and the speed to actually getting something up and working in a way that it's not just like a bunch of disparate apps, but apps that are able to tell you a story and to make it easier for you to improve the app in a way that's measurable and meaningful, makes it much more likely that's going to happen.
Yeah, and one of I would say, the problems with low-code apps in general, and first of all, I guess the term low-code is kind of just a marketing term at this point. Anything can be low-code if it's point and click. But when I talk about specifically app development platforms, most of the time, these app development platforms, they kind of fit in one of two buckets. One is either targeted towards business users or citizen developers. And so that's like really point and click heavy. You can make something up and running very quickly. But usually there's what's called a low-code glass ceiling, where as an application, you build it, you keep refining it over time, and then you want to add some maybe sophisticated aspect to it. But the low-code platform can't do it because it was all about speed and not really about complexity. The other end of the spectrum, there's low-code apps for IT teams. And these are extremely powerful platforms used by most enterprise companies. And they offer a lot of configuration, a lot of capability and customizations, but there's a massive learning curve involved because it's not like a business user can just pick it up and in a matter of hours or days build something that's functional for them. And so oftentimes in larger organizations, there's two low-code platforms in the organization, one that IT teams are using and one that business users are using. And the problem with that is now you have two different platforms, two different skill sets and knowledge bases of a product. And if we can bring what we call an end-to-end low-code platform where everybody has access to the same thing, we make one creator basically lets business users build applications, but most importantly, let's IT teams also build applications. And when a business user gets to a certain point of, I would say, complexity that they just can't solve themselves through point and click means, the IT teams can come in on that same platform because they all share the same knowledge about the product and add that functionality. So a super simple example I give is, let's say you have an application that manages visitors whenever they show up at your office, and there's a little iPad up there that takes a picture of you, prints out an ID card, whatever. And so a business user can build that application in a matter of hours. You can build something that captures some information, takes a picture on the iPad, and prints out an ID card. Super simple. But now that business user says, you know what, I don't want to just store people's pictures. Maybe I want to add a watermark to that image. And so it shows like my company logo over that person's picture that got taken, and that's what an ID card should look like. Business user doesn't know how to add a watermark to an image. It's not the easiest thing in the world. Maybe there's not a common integration to use. And so they just get stuck. And now either you don't get that functionality. It's not mission critical maybe, but it is something that you want to have happen. So how do we make that happen? Well, the IT team can come in and they can write an automation or a function in a language that they're familiar with, maybe Java, Node.js, and execute that. And all they have to do is plop that function in there. And then the IT business user can still maintain that application however they want to, knowing that I've just added a functionality to add watermarks. And then I can reuse that wherever I want to. If another sales team wants to add watermarks to maybe some charts and documents that they're using in sales collateral, that same thing can get reused. And so the reusability of components once they're created increases the speed even more. And so a lot of internal tools will kind of work that way, but that unified platform between IT teams and business users together, because a business user is always going to not have the technical ability to build everything that they need. They need the IT team's help, and we want them to work together rather than rely on separate tools. Otherwise, the IT team will say, I don't want to use this point and click app that you've built on this simple platform because of the scalability issues. Let me rebuild it on my own case. And then you've basically just caused the same problem of the app leaving the business user's hands and going into the IT team's hands.
I was reading, or I think I heard these numbers where there's roughly about 25 million developers, like real developers, hardcore developers. There is 500 million plus apps that are needed to be created within a short amount of time, and there's 1.7 billion knowledge workers. So the only way that those 500 million or so plus apps are going to be built is if these 1.7 billion folks have the tools that enable them to build something, because there's just not enough hardcore developers. So what we're looking at here is not only being able to build something called an app, but to make it where it grows and scales and has all the necessities to be able to be a serious critical business application. So this is where this kind of platform would enable, the 1.7 to get started and to build something that is usable, but for those 25 million to be able to bring it home when it's necessary and be able to add the critical components to it and not have to start from scratch.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, so what the way that gap is typically being solved, or traditionally has been solved, is through Excel. Everybody uses Excel to solve problems. I would say that's, the pioneer of low code ultimately. You don't know how to organize data, you don't know how to structure it. And I think everybody who's listening, or you too, have seen the craziest Excel spreadsheets in the world. Like, people will make these things look not like Excel anymore. But you spent a lot of time in formatting, and it's just not the ideal scenario. And so people are solving them. They're just not solving them in the best way possible. And so I think low code apps, people say we're maybe in the peak or the top of the cycle. I still think we're in a growing phase here, where basically a low code platform is going to sit right next to your productivity tools, like your word processor, your spreadsheet, and your PowerPoint that you use in an organization. That every person, doesn't matter what your skill level is, if you're just a secretary and you want to make a form or an application to manage some part of your day that makes it easier, then you should be able to do that, and it's going to be right there. Normally you would go to Excel, or you might have some emails going back and forth, but starting very simple is how you kind of get your feet wet, and then over time it'll just grow in complexity. And back to what you said, that last 25 million IT teams, those are the ones that are really taking it home. Maybe more mission critical or organization-wide applications, but within a team, within a department, that's 100% the business team or the business users trying to solve their own problems and make their lives more efficient and productive. And then that goes back to maybe what I said before about insights. Oftentimes people will build something just to organize the information, but they think the organization of the information is the endpoint. The endpoint is analysis of what's been collected, what actions have been performed, and how can we optimize the processes that are in place to actually make it, everyone's life easier. Everyone's used an application, especially in larger companies that, more or less kind of suck to use. And that's because nobody really did any kind of like UX exercises on how can we make this app easier? How can we minimize clicks? How can we figure out, people are updating the status, but the status doesn't actually mean anything or do anything. What's the point of updating the status? All those sorts of insights that people would have, we provide those when you build an application. So even if you're not thinking about it yourself, the application, the product creator will give you those suggestions and kind of nudge you along the way of maybe we can make this app a little bit better and easier for your users. People are spending a long time on a single page and they kind of get stuck, or they're just not doing anything here. Or one person's approving a process in an average of 2 days and another person is taking an average of 2 weeks. Why is there such a bottleneck here? How can we optimize a process, right? I don't want to get that other person fired for taking 2 weeks to approve a process, but at least we'll shed some light on what's going on. So I think the opportunities are truly endless. It's all about just democratization and bringing the power to solve problems to more and more people. And that knowledge worker group and that delta between how many apps are needed and how many apps are currently in production, I think it'll just widen. So whatever numbers we have today, in 5 years, that number's going to get bigger. It's not going to get smaller, even with low-code tools, because just the requirements are going to be higher and higher.
And I also like the focus on the insights and the analytics, because usually you don't really hear a lot of discussion around the data when you start talking about low code, no code. You mostly focus on it's easy for this population to build something and do it in a way that makes sense to them, which is important, totally important. And then you also hear about, the hardcore folks, they need deeper, more complex tools to use to get what they need to do, building in security and building in all these other pieces that the business folks don't want to think about. They just want to think about their core business need. But then that other group of, being able to analyze, what's working, what's not working, and being able to make it easy and fast for that analysis to take place so that everything really does work, because everything is about time and being able to go fast and scale. And if you're got one group over here building stuff and one group over here building stuff and another group trying to analyze everything, it just makes it so much more difficult to do this stuff.
Yeah, because like even when you do analysis, it goes back to the problem that the business user who's closest to the problem has the most insights. So if you outsource it to like maybe a data science team or another department or team in your company to be like, hey, give me some insights on this data. You can't just get insights without knowing what it is, right? Even if I give you, a dump of, sales data and said, here's all my leads, my contacts, my deals, this is what's going on. You have to understand the sales process, what's going on, what variables are important or not, how can we manipulate it. So that like intimate process knowledge is important. Otherwise, you can create a fancy chart and a dashboard and we'll let people do it. But the closer you are to the problem, the more you know which levers to pull to be able to identify. And so like a really that we have in this new analytics piece is also, it's called like a what if analysis. And so basically it's like a little slider that lets you take one of those variables, maybe we'll call it profit margin. And we can slide that profit margin around from maybe 10%, 15%, 20%. And based on all the different criterias, and it'll do some ML work in the background, it'll tell you what are my projected sales if I tweak this profit margin. So if I want my profit margin to move up 5 points, how much is that going to drop off on terms of sales? And you enter, either you can let it automatically do it, or you can manually train the model based on all your historical data and figure out, why are people leaving? What's the sales point? All the different attributes that might be needed. But you would only be able to pick that what if analysis if you knew what things you wanted to change, right? Maybe it's a certain feature that people are saying is a deal breaker for them, right? Then you can maybe create some charts and visualizations based on that and really drive insights. But ultimately, back to the main point ultimately is just always person closest to the problem has the most knowledge, and the more power we can give them to solve whatever it is or drive whatever insights, the better everybody's off.
Absolutely. And it's just kind of like a remote work story too, because there's so many different locations, different roles, different people. There's a lot of complexity just in that, and being able to have a platform like this at least feel like it's more centralized and more connected. That should make it a little easier for folks to get up to speed, to be able to do their jobs, but also think a little more outside the box about what possibly could be done. And then, you know, the more technical folks can focus on that and being able to take what's already been created by the kind of the business folks and to make it where it is scalable and it's secure and it's going to be running 99.999% of whatever it is, instead of being so disconnected and being able to, you have to almost be like some kind of a Inspector Clouseau. Well, hopefully better than that. But, having to try to piece and pull and try to make sense of things that are all over the place. This kind of makes it a little easier to stay connected and understand the big picture and not just everybody focus on their little picture.
Yeah, and one of the big things we're working on is kind of proactive insights too, because even when we talk about getting information out, you don't have to go into the system and start digging around to figure out what insights you want to drive. However, if we can just proactively say, hey, look, there's been a tweak here, things like anomaly detection, or the trend is off for this month versus your historical averages or whatever for the season. People should be presented the information that they're looking for, or that they don't even know that they're looking for. That's like really the ultimate like next level, right? And so we're doing a lot of work on machine learning and AI systems that basically will do that proactive outreach for whenever there's an issue, whenever there's an optimization possibility. It's all about just nobody's full-time, like the business user's full-time job is not app development. So we don't want them to be in the app builder all the time, but we do want them to be notified and say, hey, look, there's a way we can make this better. Your users are struggling here. Otherwise, you would have to have that mindset of, I'm going to go in and dig around. But people have a day job. App building for the business user is not their day job. It's just to make it easier. So whatever we can do to make it easier is what we've been doing for basically the past 15 years now, I guess.
Right. And things happen. Things come up. If you're able to have your tech focused folks, the IT hardcore developers, be able to focus on that and then have a way to easily bake that in to the things that are going on from the business folks, everybody seems to be in a much better position, which is definitely not the case in the traditional sense of how IT and business folks work together.
Yeah, I also don't want to paint the picture that like, what do you call it? What you said is everything is rosy. There's definitely concerns that organizations have to have in place. Ultimately, right. If you're letting everybody build applications, like in my ideal world here, it is kind of a potential nightmare. You have a lot of compliance issues, a lot of governance controls, a lot of privacy issues, different regulations, state by state, country by country, that a normal application builder or business user might not be familiar with. What are the data laws of, Colorado, for example? It might not be top of mind, but we as a platform have to provide that like insights and say, hey, look, you're storing a Colorado customer's data in your sales system or whatever other system of record you have. That customer says, I want my data deleted, then the low-code app has to also honor that. And we should proactively suggest how to best comply with privacy regulations, security compliances, like even things as simple as password policies that are all required across any kind of highly regulated industries. And so I think the big reason the adoption curve has been a little bit lower than maybe it should be is because of the fear of compliance. You let everybody build, and especially you let people integrate, they're going to have data flowing from one system to another. IT team doesn't have insights. But with this unified platform, we kind of add a level of control where we can say, look, these team members have access to this kind of data. They can read it. They can write to it. We want to have a system of truth or a source of truth of that data source. And so a lot of just different administrative controls that oftentimes I think are a little bit kind of forgotten because the goal is so much about app building and you want them to build apps. And from a business perspective, your goal is kind of the more apps that you build on my platform, the more stuck you are in my ecosystem. And even if you don't like the way things are managed, you'll still stay around because you can't go anywhere. But that's not really the way we look at things from a Zoho level overall. And so being able to make sure people want to be here and it is productive for them. So a lot of capabilities around management, user permissions, security policies, audit trails, things like that are really necessary for an IT team to make sure that are people building good applications? Are they not breaking any kind of rules when they're building them? Is that data secured? If someone leaves, is the right access controls being revoked? All that kind of admin backend stuff that often goes untalked about is kind of why people tend to fear adopting these at a bigger scale. And even for smaller companies too, it's the same way where if the IT team is not really involved in it or knows what's going on, then they can build bad things and it can go bad very quickly. And so there have to be guardrails in place, and that's why it's not as rosy. But I think we're going to get to a place where like governance overall is going to be a bigger selling factor, especially to decision makers like CIOs, CTOs, IT teams that are managing it. That's what they care about, the management aspect, not so much the builder. That's not going to, that's not their thing. So
right. Yeah, that data privacy thing might be more and more of importance too as things go on. And just something to think about.
That's cool. Maybe we should talk about that more in detail one day.
Maybe. One thing before we go, generally speaking, the Zoho creator community is huge. And guys like me, kind of analyst folks, we always thought that, people are doing things with the Zoho Creator Platform. They must be all integrating it into all those apps you have. But is it still the case where a lot of these developers, these creator developers, they really don't do a lot with the Zoho products? They are just using you guys as a big platform to build and run their apps on.
Yeah, it's kind of, it is interesting. We have, I would say, to estimate about a 50-50 split in terms of people who only use our creator product and don't use any Zoho product outside of that. To them, Zoho is creator is Zoho. Some people call it the Zoho, and that's their system that they're using. And then the other 50% are obviously taking advantage of the Zoho ecosystem. I would always recommend people to use the Zoho ecosystem because there's a lot of integration benefits and added value there. However, even with the people who are only using Creator, typically they're using other software solutions. So they're probably a Salesforce shop, a Microsoft shop, maybe Google, maybe using a bunch of best-of-breed tools. And so you have to be able to play nice with everybody. You can't just live in your own ecosystem. In an ideal world, everybody would just use Zoho apps and never anything else. But we don't live in the ideal world, and we have to play nice with everybody. And so we have to provide a bunch of integrations to business software around every major category and make sure they use it properly. So we try not to play favorites or anything, but by all means, the Zoho ecosystem is great. But if you want to use it with other stuff, it's going to happen, and that you have to focus a lot there. So it's a big focus for us outside of the Zoho world.
It's good that folks realize. I mean, there is that really great application integration system there, but you don't have to use it if you are looking to build an app to connect to something else. That's really something I want to make sure people understood. Okay. Given news yesterday, what's the best way for a company to get started? They have their business folks, they have their IT folks, they have their analytics folks. What's the best way for folks to get started with this?
I would say most people would tell you go to zoho.com/creator and sign up, but that's not what I'm going to tell you. I really think you should get the stakeholders that you mentioned in a room together and really just talk about, is low-code something that we can implement in our organization? I've seen too many failed implementations where, you sign up for a platform, you deploy it, but you don't really have a strategy around it. And then you might just write off low-code as a whole and say, this entire market is not for us, and we'll stick with our current development practices. So everyone needs to get into a room and really strategize. Can our business users take advantage of this? How can we start with a small pilot program? Where do we see ourselves in 3, 6, 9, 12 months down the line in terms of adoption in the organization? Oftentimes companies will come to us and say, look, we have a 1,000-person company, we want to buy 1,000 seats. It's like, no, we're not going to sell you 1,000 seats today. We're going to sell you 10 or 100. We're going to start with a small pilot program, make sure you're doing this successfully, and then we'll grow into that 1,000 when it comes. But too many people either try to go head first, see all this hype about solving all these problems and maybe hearing the marketing stories, and you might jump in too deep. But it's a very, very tricky thing where if you don't have a good strategy in place, typically low-code implementations in an organization are going to fail at organizations of any size. And so really, I would say, how do you think low-code can work? Who are going to be the champions in the company? How are you going to strategize which apps get built? Who's going to take ownership? How is management going to happen? and governance of those applications. Those are all, I would say product agnostic questions. Whether you sign up for Creator, another product, I don't really care. The strategy is the most important thing because that's going to be what increases the real productivity of the organization. If you sign up for Creator, great. If you sign up for something else, great. I don't really care. As long as the companies are more productive, it's a win for the low-code ecosystem overall, and that's all we can really ask for.
Yeah, that's really a great way to put it. A lot of folks feel like, oh, we can just dive in. We paid the money, let's start using it, as opposed to, well, what are we actually trying to do? Do we have the right people involved? Do we have the right processes identified? It feels like that's a problem that's been going on forever. But at least with what you guys are putting out there, you're giving them the opportunity to do it right once the hard work of identifying what we need, how should we go about it, and then implementing it with what you guys have. That would be great if folks took your advice to do that and then dive in.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing I'll say on that too is you kind of only have one, maybe two chances at a low-code implementation in the company, because first of all, when you build an app on a low-code platform, there's no portability. So I can't go from Zoho to Salesforce, Zoho to Microsoft. Everyone's low-code app structure is very proprietary. And so you have to basically rebuild everything. And then you have to retrain your teams on how to build on a new platform. Not an easy task. You can train somebody on how to use Zoho CRM versus Salesforce. You still have an idea of leads, contacts, deals. The basics of that are the same. But to introduce a whole new application builder interface, not the easiest thing in the world. And one or two burned times or failed implementations, you're just going to give up on the entire product as a whole because you're going to say this is a nightmare. And so that's why the strategy is way more important. Usually I'll tell people, measure twice, cut once. Figure out that strategy, make sure it's nailed down, and then find a product that's going to align with your strategy. Maybe Creator's not right for you. Maybe another product's not right for you, but your product should align to your strategy. Don't align your strategy to the product. It's probably the best thing I could say.
Awesome. Now, when people have gone through the upfront work and they're ready, where can they learn more about Zoho Creator?
Yeah. So you can Google Zoho Creator. I prefer if you DuckDuckGo Zoho Creator, or you can go to zoho.com/creator and you'll sign up there. Or you go to zoho.com, you'll find Creator on the page. Yeah, that's pretty much all I would say.
And then the last thing, where were you on February 13th?
Where was I? I don't know. You should. I'm surprised you should have that hat framed in a box that's air sealed, because it's going to be the last one that's ever made. Oh, you probably bought a few of them. And so this is going to be a memorabilia. You can maybe resell that in a few years. So yeah, you should store all those. Don't let the air destroy that kind of merchandise, because it's never going to happen again. So,
oh my goodness, this is coming from what's your team again?
I mean,
were you even alive, walking the earth when that team won a Super Bowl?
Yeah, I mean, when America's team won Super Bowls, I was in my prime of youth. Life was simpler back then. I didn't have to worry about anything. I was just watching football and enjoying, the Cowboys take care of things.
Okay. You were watching football, and we'll be watching Privacy
very shortly. Yeah, for sure.
Coming back.
A lot to catch up on.
All right, man. It's been good catching up with Tejas Gadhia. Take his advice about all that was said. Yeah, Zoho Creator Platform is great, but make sure you do the upfront work so you get the most out of it, basically. All right. So on behalf of Tejas, Brent Leary here. See you later.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Brent.